"Your code is trash. I am deleting it," the new CTO said. "Do it," I challenged. He hit delete. Instantly, the $500 million merger contract on the screen vanished. "Where did it go?" He panicked. I held up my USB drive. The code wasn't the product. It was the decryption key. And it just left the building. That was the end. But the beginning was much quieter. It started with a complaint about a chair. The first thing Bryce did when he walked into the office was not introduce himself to the team. It was to complain that the ergonomic Herman Miller chairs did not have enough lumbar aggression. That was the phrase he used. Lumbar aggression. I sat in the back of the conference room nursing a lukewarm coffee that tasted like burnt ambition and office supplies, watching him pace. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car and a smile that did not reach his eyes. A predator in Italian wool. He was the new chief technology officer, brought in specifically to grease the wheels for the impending $500 million merger with Apex Corp. But from where I was sitting, Bryce was not grease. He was sand, and he was about to get poured directly into the gears of a machine I had spent 15 years building. My name is Douglas. I do not ask for managers. I am the person managers call when the digital sky is falling. I am a lead product security engineer. In plain English, I build the vaults where the company keeps its skeletons, its gold, and its proprietary algorithms. I do not talk much. I do not network. I do not do team building trust falls because I know exactly who in this room would drop me to save their quarterly bonus. I write code that works. I encrypt data that needs to stay buried, and I go home to my silence. But silence, apparently, is a liability when a guy like Bryce enters the room. "Listen up, rock stars," Bryce announced, clapping his hands together with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. He had that energetic, manic vibe of a guy who microdoses mushrooms and listens to podcasts about biohacking. "We have 6 weeks until the merger ink dries. 6 weeks to trim the fat. I have been looking at the repo and honestly, it is a mess. It is bloated. It is legacy." He said the word legacy like it was a slur. In the tech world, legacy usually means old and clunky. But in my corner of the world, high-level encryption and product security, legacy means battle-tested. It means this code has survived Russian botnets, Chinese phishing campaigns, and 3 different catastrophic server floods. But Bryce did not see armor. He saw rust. "We need to be agile," Bryce continued, pacing so fast I got dizzy just watching him. "We need to be lean. If a piece of code is not directly driving revenue or user acquisition, it is dead weight. We are purging the system. We are going to migrate everything to the cloud, native serverless architecture I implemented at my last startup." A murmur went through the room. His last startup had imploded because they leaked 40,000 user credit card numbers on the dark web. But nobody said that. Everyone just nodded, terrified for their jobs. "Douglas," he said, pivoting suddenly to point a manicured finger at me. "You are in charge of what is it? Internal protocol security. That sounds like a fancy word for cost center." I did not blink. I just set my coffee cup down deliberately slow. "It is encryption, Bryce. I secure the data transfer tunnels. Without them, the merger documents are just plain text files floating on the internet for anyone to grab." He laughed, a short barking sound. "Encryption, right? We have tools for that. Now AWS handles that. We do not need custom scripts clogging up the pipeline. Your department, it feels heavy. It feels like it got comfortable." "Comfortable," I repeated, my voice flat. "My code is the only reason we passed the SEC audit last year." "That was last year," Bryce dismissed, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. "This is the future. We are cutting the cord. I want a full audit of your repositories by Friday. Anything that is not critical to the UI demo gets archived. And by archived, I mean deleted." The meeting ended with a flurry of buzzwords: synergy, paradigm shift, low-hanging fruit. I walked back to my desk, my stomach churning with a cold, hard knot of realization. This was not just a restructuring. This was a demolition. Bryce did not understand the architecture. He looked at a load-bearing wall and saw something that blocked his view. So, he was going to take a sledgehammer to it. I sat at my desk surrounded by 3 monitors, glowing with the comforting green and white of terminal text. I could have marched into his office. I could have drawn a diagram. I could have shouted, but I knew men like Bryce. If I fought him, he would dig in. He would see it as a challenge to his authority. He would fire me for insubordination, and then delete the code anyway just to prove a point. I stared at the blinking cursor. A memory surfaced unbidden 10 years ago. A fintech startup. A manager named Greg who wanted velocity. I told him the security patch needed 48 hours to propagate. He told me I was thinking too small. He pushed the update live at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, 50,000 pension accounts were empty. Greg got a promotion for swift crisis management. I got fired for the initial vulnerability. Never again. I looked across the office at Bryce, who was now high-fiving the VP of sales. He was a vandal in a suit. He was going to burn the cathedral down because he wanted to sell the stained glass. I needed a different approach. A ghost does not fight an army. A ghost haunts the castle. I realized logic would not work on Bryce. I needed an insurance policy. My Slack notification sound pinged, sharp and intrusive against the hum of the air conditioning. It was Dave, the junior developer who still thought open-source libraries were safe to use without checking the dependencies. Dave wrote, "Hey Douglas, did you see Bryce just revoked write access to the main repository for the security team? He says he wants to approve all commits personally to ensure code hygiene." I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. Code hygiene. A phrase Bryce had undoubtedly picked up from a Medium article written by a 20-year-old growth hacker. I turned to my middle monitor, the one reserved for the live environment. I typed a simple command to update the timestamp on the daily log, git push. The terminal blinked once, then spat back red text, error 4003. Forbidden, write access denied. He had locked me out of my own house. He had taken the keys to the vault and handed them to a guy who likely thought password 123 was too complex to remember. A normal person would panic. A normal person would call human resources and file a complaint about workflow obstruction. I just felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. It was the same feeling I got when I was debugging a critical failure at 3 in the morning. The emotion drains away, replaced by pure logic. If X, then Y. If Bryce wanted to play God with the file system, let him. But I was not going to let him burn the company down without an insurance policy. I opened a separate terminal window, one that did not log to the central server. I typed in a command I had not used in years, git clone mirror. I was not just downloading the files. I was cloning the entire history, the branches, the tags, and most importantly, the encryption logic that lived in the hidden subdirectories Bryce did not even know how to list. I pulled it all down. Every line of code I had written for 15 years. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 35%. The file sizes were massive, dense with the mathematical weight of the core synthesis project. Douglas. I minimized the window instantly. The terminal vanished, replaced by a generic email inbox. Bryce was standing at my cubicle wall, leaning over like a guidance counselor trying to relate to a troubled teen. He smelled of sandalwood and aggressive confidence. "We need to talk about your attitude in the meeting," he said, smoothing his tie. "I know change is hard. I know you old guard engineers get attached to your little scripts. But I need team players. I need people who are hungry." I looked up at him, keeping my face completely blank. "I understand, Bryce. You want efficiency, you want modern." "Exactly." He pointed at me, beaming. "See, you get it. I am going to need you to hand over the documentation for your encryption protocols. I am bringing in a consulting firm, some guys I know from Stanford, to rewrite it in Rust. Faster, cleaner." I felt a twitch in my right hand, a phantom desire to slam my fist on the desk. "Rewrite the encryption logic," I said slowly. "In 6 weeks. They are wizards, Douglas. Wizards. Just give them the docs." "Sure, I lied." "I will compile them for you." "Great. And hey, let us try to smile more."
Yeah.
"The merger is a celebration." He tapped my desk twice, a rhythmic hollow sound, and walked away, already typing on his phone. I watched him go. He walked with the bounce of a man who had never been responsible for a catastrophic failure. He did not know that gravity existed, and he was busy sawing through the ropes that held him to the earth. I brought the terminal window back up. Status 100% complete. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavily encrypted, hardware-locked USB drive. It was a ruggedized drive encased in rubber and aluminum, the kind you could run over with a tank. I plugged it in. The computer recognized it as a secure volume. I moved the mirrored repository onto the drive. The transfer bar appeared. This was the dangerous part. If the network traffic monitors were looking for large data packets moving to external storage, an alert would trip in the Security Operations Center. But I had written the alert rules for the Security Operations Center. I knew the blind spots. I throttled the transfer speed, keeping it just under the radar, bleeding the data out of the system drop by drop. It took 10 minutes. 10 minutes of staring at my screen, pretending to read a compliance manual, while the heart and soul of the company's infrastructure flowed silently onto a stick of memory no bigger than my thumb. Transfer complete. I initiated a script on my local machine to scrub the logs of the download. I was not stealing the company's property. I was saving its life. Or maybe I was preparing the weapon that would end it. I had not decided yet. I ejected the USB drive. I put it in my pocket. It felt heavy like a stone. "Want legacy gone, Bryce?" I whispered to the empty air. "Be careful what you wish for." The first shot had been fired. He had revoked my access. He had insulted my work. He had threatened my team. Now I was just going to sit back and watch him load the gun. He was pointing it at his own foot, and he had his finger on the trigger. I looked over at Dave. He was staring at his screen, his face pale. He looked like he was about to vomit. "He is deleting the load balancers," Dave whispered, his voice cracking. Douglas, look at row 42 on the project sheet. He marked the traffic shaper script as redundant because he said the cloud provider does it automatically. "The cloud provider charges us 10 cents per gigabyte for that service," I said calmly. "My script does it for free." "He does not care about the cost," Dave hissed. "He cares about the file count. He said we have too many files. He wants to get the repository size down by 40% before the merger audit. He thinks it makes us look lean." I scanned the shared spreadsheet Dave had open. It was a kill list. Rows and rows of file names, directories, and libraries were highlighted in neon red. Beside each one was a status column, pending deletion. My eyes stopped at row 108 file, user/local/bin/core-synthesis.proj, owner D. Miller. Reason for deletion: obfuscated logic, lacks documentation, non-standard file extension, looks like junk data, action immediate purge. My heart did not skip a beat. It hammered once, hard against my ribs. A singular thud of rage, junk data. Core synthesis was not junk. It was the beating heart of our security infrastructure. It was a custom key encapsulation mechanism I had written 5 years ago when we realized standard RSA keys were getting too slow for the volume of legal documents we processed. The non-standard file extension was a security feature to prevent automated ransomware from encrypting our encryption keys. It was obfuscated because if you could read the logic, you could reverse engineer the master seed. Bryce was looking at a nuclear reactor control rod and calling it a useless metal stick. I stood up. I could feel the weight of the USB drive in my pocket tapping against my thigh. I had the backup. I was safe. But seeing it there, written in red pixels, broke something in my resolve to stay quiet. I walked over to the glass-walled fishbowl where Bryce was holding court with his new Tiger team. 3 guys in Patagonia vests who looked like they were 12 years old. "Bryce," I said, stepping into the room. I did not knock. He looked up annoyed. "Douglas, we are in a sprint planning session. Unless the building is on fire, this can wait." "Row 108, I said. "The core synthesis project. You have it marked for purge." "Yes." He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "The mystery file." My guys looked at it. "It is spaghetti code, Douglas. It is dense, unreadable, and frankly smells like job security. We are replacing it with a standard AES-256 library. It is not just encryption," I said, keeping my voice dangerously level. "It is the key generator. It links the timestamp of the merger contracts to the digital signature. If you delete that file, the handshake fails. The documents will not open. They will lock down permanently." Bryce rolled his eyes and looked at his Tiger team. They snickered. One of them, a kid named Tyler who was probably still on his parents' health insurance, spoke up. "Actually, Douglas, we checked the dependencies. Nothing calls that script. It is orphan code. It is not running in the active pipeline. It is not running because it is an asynchronous daemon," I explained, trying to use small words. "It wakes up only when a contract is accessed. If you check the logs, you will see the heartbeat." "What check the logs?" Bryce interrupted. "Zero activity in the last 48 hours because nobody has opened a merger contract in the last 48 hours. Bryce stood up. He was not smiling anymore. Douglas, stop. This is exactly what I am talking about. You are hoarding code. You are clinging to the past. I have made a decision. The architecture is changing. We are moving to a unified security model. He leaned over the table, getting into my personal space. Your code is messy. It confuses the new developers. It goes. End of discussion. I looked at him. I looked at Tyler, who was smirking at his laptop. I looked at the whiteboard where they had drawn a diagram of the new architecture that was basically just a bunch of arrows pointing to a cloud icon. A switch flipped in my head. The anger didn't vanish, but it froze. It crystallized into something sharp and useful. Okay, I said. Bryce blinked. He had expected a fight. He had expected me to beg. Okay, you are the CTO, I said. If you say it is junk, it is junk. I will focus on the UI transition like you asked. Good, Bryce said, relaxing instantly. Good, I knew you would come around. See, it is liberating, isn't it? Letting go of the clutter. Liberating echoed. I walked out of the office. The USB drive felt warm against my leg. I had tried. I had given him the warning. Now, whatever happened next was not negligence. It was gravity. And I was the only one wearing a parachute. Dave was waiting for me in the hallway, clutching his water bottle like a grenade he was afraid to throw. His eyes darted from the glass door of Bryce's office back to me. Did you save it? He whispered. Did you convince him? No, I said, walking past him toward the break room. He is going to delete it. But Douglas, if he deletes the key generator, what happens to the archive? I stopped and looked at Dave. He was a good kid. He actually cared about the work, which was a rare and dangerous quality in this building. I decided to give him a crumb of truth, just enough to keep him from hyperventilating. Dave, do you remember when I told you to never hard code credentials? Yeah. And do you remember when I told you that the smartest engineer is not the one who writes the most code, but the one who knows where the backups are? He stared at me, confusion clouding his face. Douglas' code is next on the block. He is going to wipe the drive by noon. Let him, I said, a small, cold smile touching the corners of my lips. It is already gone. What do you mean? I mean that core synthesis on the server is just a shell. I lied. Well, it was a half-lie. The version on the server was the production instance. But the logic, the mathematical soul of the system, was currently sitting in my pocket, crypted on a USB drive that Bryce could not access in a million years. Go back to your desk, Dave, I said softly, and maybe update your resume. Just in case, I went back to my cubicle. The office hummed with a nervous energy. The scent of ozone and panic was stronger now. I could hear the clack of mechanical keyboards coming from the fishbowl where Bryce's Tiger team was busy disassembling the engine of a car that was currently moving at 80 miles per hour. I sat down and woke my monitors. I had one task left. In the corporate world, truth does not matter. Only documentation matters. If you cannot prove you warned them, you are just as guilty as the person who pushed the button. I opened the company's ticketing system and created a new entry. Ticket number 9902, title, Confirmation of Deletion Order for Core Synthesis. I typed steadily, my fingers moving with the precision of a court stenographer. Per Chief Technology Officer instructions, the encryption key generator located in user local bin core synthesis is deemed redundant and approved for deletion. Security team advises against this action, but acknowledges executive override. Deletion of this file will result in the permanent loss of decryption capabilities for all historical contracts. Please confirm intent to proceed. I assigned the ticket to Bryce. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of my cold coffee. I watched the ticket status, pending. 5 minutes passed. I could see Bryce in his office, checking his phone. He frowned, tapped the screen rapidly, and then shoved the phone back into his pocket. My email pinned. Ticket closed. Status approved. Comment, stop being dramatic, Douglas. Proceed with the purge. We need to be clean for the demo. I saved the email as a PDF. I printed it. I walked to the printer, retrieved the single warm sheet of paper, and placed it carefully in my bag. It was not just a piece of paper. It was a shield. When the lawyers came, and they always came, I would not be the negligent engineer. I would be the ignored prophet. I returned to my terminal. I found the file on the shared drive, the one Bryce was so eager to kill. I did not delete it. I would not do his dirty work for him. But I did rename it, I changed core synthesis.pra to legacy trash.do-not-touch.old. If he wanted it gone, he would have to drag it to the trash bin himself. And I had a feeling he would enjoy it. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for him to step into it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of destruction. I watched the commit log scroll by on my secondary monitor, red lines everywhere. Deleted traffic shaper, deleted redundancy check, deleted audit logger. Bryce and his team were tearing down the load, bearing walls and congratulating each other on the open floor plan. They were moving fast, breaking things, just like the manifesto said. But they were breaking the wrong things. Around 3 in the afternoon, the atmosphere shifted. The frantic typing stopped. Bryce emerged from his office, looking flushed and triumphant. He gathered his Tiger team around a large monitor. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying over the low cubicle walls. "The back end is scrubbed. We are officially lean. Now let us deploy the new front end. The Vortal is going live on the staging server." The Vortal. I suppressed a shudder. He actually called it that. I watched as they pushed the code. A loading bar appeared on the big screen in the fishbowl. Green, 100%. "We are live!" Bryce shouted. There was a round of applause from the 3 guys in vests. Bryce looked around the office, his eyes scanning the room for validation. His gaze landed on me. He smirked. It was a look of pure condescension. "See," his eyes said. The sky did not fall. I didn't frown. I didn't scowl. I slowly, deliberately crossed my arms and offered a polite, tight-lipped smile. He turned back to his team, high-fiving Tyler. He didn't realize that by migrating the data without the active key generator, he was essentially moving 1,000 locked safes into a new room without bringing the combinations. He thought he was cleaning house. He was actually burying the gold. I checked the time. 4:30. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, sharp shadows across the carpet. The demo for the board and the Apex partners was scheduled for Friday morning. That was when the curtain would rise. That was when the illusion would break. Leaving early, Douglas. I turned. Bryce was standing at the end of the aisle, holding a sparkling water. "My work is done, Bryce," I said. "The repository is clean, just like you asked." "Good man," he said, taking a sip. "You know, once we get past this merger, we should sit down. Talk about your role. I think you could really benefit from some retraining, learn the new stack." "I am always open to learning," I said, my voice neutral. "Great. See you at the demo tomorrow. Try not to look so gloomy. We are making history." "I would not miss it for the world," I said. I walked to the elevators. I pressed the down button. The doors opened, and I stepped inside, leaving the scent of ozone and bad decisions behind me. As the doors closed, cutting off the view of Bryce leaning against my cubicle, I finally allowed myself to exhale. He was making history, all right. He just didn't know it was the kind of history they taught in case studies about corporate negligence. I drove home in silence. I did not turn on the radio. I needed to save my hearing for the scream that was coming. It would not be a scream of fear. It would be the scream of a system realizing it had been lobotomized. Tomorrow the Vortal would open its mouth to speak, and I knew exactly what it was going to say. Nothing. Friday morning arrived with the inevitability of a tax audit. Conference Room B, formerly known as the War Room, was packed to capacity. The air conditioning was struggling to keep up with the collective body heat of 20 executives, 3 board members, and Bryce, who was sweating through his bespoke shirt. It was time for the Alpha Demo. This was the show and tell where Bryce was supposed to prove that his lean, agile approach had revolutionized the merger platform. The acquisition partners from Apex Corporation were dialing in via video link on the big screen. Their faces, pixelated, stern, and expensive-looking, loomed over us like judges at a tribunal. I sat in the very back row, wedged between a pile of spare cables and a large potted ficus plant. I was not technically invited, but corporate protocol demanded that a technical representative be present in case the internet died. Bryce had made it clear I was there to be furniture, nothing more. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bryce began, gesturing grandly at the projector screen. "What you are about to see is the future of secure document transfer. We have stripped away the clunky, archaic interfaces of the past. We have streamlined the back end. We have created the Vortal." He actually called it the Vortal. I heard the head of Human Resources stifle a cough that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. On the screen, a slick, modern interface appeared. It had rounded corners, soft drop shadows, and lots of white space. It looked beautiful. It looked like an app you would use to order gluten-free muffins, not a system designed to handle sensitive intellectual property. As you can see, Bryce narrated, clicking his mouse. The user experience is frictionless. Drag, drop, done. He dragged a dummy file labeled merger contract draft.pdf into the upload box. A cheerful green check mark appeared instantly. Upload complete, Bryce bragged. Zero latency. In the old system, this took 30 seconds. Why? Because the legacy code was choking on unnecessary encryption cycles. We optimized the path. Now it is instantaneous. I crossed my arms, sinking lower in my chair. It was instantaneous because it was not doing anything. I could tell just by looking at the response time. There was no handshake. There was no key exchange. There was no hashing. Real encryption, the kind that uses 4096-bit keys, involves heavy mathematics. It takes processor time. It takes a verifiable moment for the logic to grind the numbers. Bryce was basically uploading a file to a public storage bucket and calling it a secure transfer. It was a magic trick. He showed them the empty hat, but he forgot to put the rabbit in. Impressive speed, one of the Apex executives said from the screen, and the security protocols. These documents contain sensitive intellectual property. Bryce did not miss a beat. Military grade. We utilize a proprietary cloud, native shield that wraps the data in a dynamic envelope. Dynamic envelope. He was making it up as he went along. And what about the historical archive? The Apex guy asked. We need to verify the timestamps on the patent filings from 2018 before we sign off. That is a hard requirement under Clause 14C. Clause 14C, my ears perked up. That was the specific legal requirement that mandated a dual authenticated, immutable timestamp chain. It was the exact function performed by the core synthesis code. The code Bryce had marked as junk, fully integrated. Bryce lied. We have migrated all legacy data to the new portal. It is all accessible through the single pane of glass. He clicked on the archive tab. The screen populated with a list of file names. It looked perfect. It looked functional. But I knew it was just a list. It was a menu without a kitchen. Then, he made the mistake of looking at me. Maybe he felt my eyes boring into the back of his skull. Maybe he just needed a punching bag to elevate his own status. He chuckled, gesturing toward the back of the room with a laser pointer. The red dot landed on my chest. You know, our lead security engineer Douglas is back there, Bryce said. He was very concerned that we were moving too fast. He paused for effect. The room turned to look at me. I felt the weight of 20 pairs of eyes. Douglas's encryption methods were so dense, I think even he forgot how they worked half the time. Right, Douglas. A few sycophants laughed. The vice president of sales smirked. It was a classic power move. Undermine the technical expert to make the risky shortcut seem like a genius management decision. I did not frown. I did not scowl. I slowly, deliberately crossed my arms and offered a polite, tight-lipped smile. Complexity is often mistaken for confusion by the uninitiated, I said. My voice was not loud, but in the acoustic dead zone of the conference room it carried. The laughter died instantly. Bryce's smile faltered for a microsecond before he recovered. Well, complexity is the enemy of execution, he retorted, turning back to the screen. And as you can see, we are executing. I looked to my left. Sitting 2 chairs away was Robert, the general counsel. He was not looking at the screen. He was looking at me. Robert was the one who had drafted the merger contract, including Clause 14C. He understood the legal exposure better than anyone in the room. Robert raised an eyebrow. A silent question. Is he full of it? I met his gaze. I gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible shake of my head. No, it is not real. Robert closed his notebook. He did not say anything, but the shift in his body language was tectonic. He stopped taking notes. He crossed his arms. He leaned back. He knew. Bryce wrapped up the demo with a flurry of slides showing projected cost savings. We are ready for the final data migration this weekend, he announced. Come Monday, the old system is history. As the room cleared out, Bryce stopped by my chair. He was high on adrenaline, vibrating with the thrill of the performance. See, he whispered, leaning down so only I could hear. Nobody cares about your math, Douglas. They care about the UI. They care about the story. It was a nice story. Bryce, I said, standing up and picking up my bag. I just hope the ending holds up. You are just bitter because I am deleting your life's work, he sneered. I am not bitter, I said. I am observant. You showed them a menu, Bryce. But you did not check if the kitchen was on fire. I walked out. Let him have his victory lap. He did not realize that by migrating the data without the active key generator, he was essentially moving the entire vault into the ocean and hoping it would float. He thought he was cleaning house. He was actually evicting the foundation. Monday was coming. The real test was coming. And unlike the Vortal, gravity does not have a user interface. It just pulls. The next morning, the office atmosphere had shifted from anxious to funereal. Friday had arrived, and with it, the external validation audit. Bryce's door had been closed for an hour. Through the glass, I could see him gesturing wildly at a man I did not recognize. The stranger was a severe, looking individual in a charcoal suit who looked like he ate tax codes for breakfast. He was typing on a heavy, ruggedized laptop that looked out of place on Bryce's sleek, reclaimed wood desk. This was Henderson, the auditor from the acquiring bank. He was not interested in user interface stories or synergy. He was interested in math. Douglas. A voice snapped. I turned. Bryce was standing at my cubicle, his face a mottled shade of crimson. Henderson stood behind him, looking unimpressed. Mr. Henderson here is having trouble verifying the system integrity, Bryce said, his voice tight. He seems to think there is a gap. Henderson stepped forward. He did not offer a hand. Mr. Douglas, I am attempting to run a standard handshake validation against your current repository. The hash matches for the static files, but whenever I try to generate a dynamic session key, the system returns a null value. That is strange, Bryce interjected, his smile twitching. It worked fine in the demo yesterday. The demo was a UI mockup, Bryce, I said calmly. I turned my attention to the auditor. Mr. Henderson, are you trying to validate against the core synthesis library? I am trying to validate against the entire codebase, Henderson said. But yes, the call to the key encapsulation mechanism returns nothing. It is as if the function does not exist. That is because the encapsulation mechanism is not linked, I said. It has been deprecated. We are moving to a cloud-native model, remember? I shot a look at Bryce. Bryce's eyes bulged. He knew exactly what I was doing. I was quoting him. Just fix it, Douglas, Bryce hissed. Give him the test file he needs. I cannot give him a file generated by a system that you flagged for deletion, Bryce, I said. That would be deploying deprecated code into a live audit environment. That is a security violation. I am ordering you to generate a valid key, Bryce shouted. The entire office went silent. Heads popped up over cubicle walls like prairie dogs sensing a predator. I cannot, I said. The engine is gone. You ordered it removed. You sabotaged it? Bryce screamed. He actually pointed a finger in my face. You did this. You hid the dependencies. You made it fail on purpose to embarrass me. I did not hide anything, I said, my voice rising just enough to be heard by the silent audience of engineers behind us. I told you. Row 108. You said it was junk. You said it was spaghetti code. You ordered it deleted. I am the chief technology officer, Bryce roared. If I say it works, it works. You are obstructing a merger. You are going rogue. He turned to the security guard who stood near the elevators. It was Mike, a guy I had known for 10 years. We talked about football every Monday. Mike looked uncomfortable. Escort him out, Bryce commanded. Now, revoke his badge. He is a security risk. Henderson, the auditor, looked shocked. Mr. Bryce, firing your lead engineer during a validation audit is highly irregular. Is not an engineer, Bryce spat. He is a roadblock. Get him out of here. I will fix this myself. Mike stepped forward, looking apologetic. Douglas, I have to, okay, Mike? I said. I stood up. I did not pack my box. I did not grab my ficus plant. I did not take the framed photo of my cat. I just took my personal phone and checked my pocket to ensure the encrypted USB drive was still there. I looked at Bryce one last time. He was red-faced, panting, convinced that by removing me, he was removing the problem. He did not understand that the problem was the only thing holding the roof up. Good luck with the audit, Bryce, I said. And remember, Dashrov is not a debugging tool. Get out! Bryce yelled. I walked to the elevators. I could feel the eyes of every engineer on my back. They were terrified. They were also witnessing something rare. The captain was not just going down with the ship. The captain was throwing the navigator overboard, because he did not like the news about the iceberg. I stepped into the elevator. Mike held the door for a moment.
"Sorry, Douglas," Mike muttered.
"Not your fault, Mike," I said. "Do me a favor. Tell Dave to update his resume tonight." "Seriously?" Mike nodded and let the doors slide shut. The silence of the elevator was absolute. I watched the numbers count down. 40, 39. Fate. I was fired. I was unemployed for the first time in 15 years. My stock options were likely void. My reputation was currently being shredded in a glass office 40 floors above me. But as I walked out of the building and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot, I did not feel fear. I felt lighter. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the USB drive. Bryce thought he had won. He thought he had cut the cord. He did not realize he was currently standing on a trapdoor, and he had just fired the guy who knew where the latch was. I got into my car. I put the key in the ignition, but I did not turn it. I just sat there for a moment, listening to the engine of the world humming around me. Up on the 40th floor, the countdown had begun. They had 48 hours until the merger deadline. They had an angry auditor, and they had a CTO who thought he could fix a mathematical impossibility by deleting more files. I turned the key. The car roared to life. I was going home. I was going to open a bottle of wine, and I was going to wait for the inevitable text message telling me that the sky had finally fallen. The Colorado air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and impending rain. I sat on my back porch, a glass of Pinot Noir in my hand, watching the sun dip below the Rockies. My cat, Turing, wound himself around my ankles, purring with a rhythmic vibration that felt infinitely more stable than the server architecture I had left behind. It was Friday night. By all accounts, I should have been panicked. I was unemployed. My stock options were likely worthless. I had been escorted out of the building by a security guard I played fantasy football with. But as I took a sip of the wine, letting the tannins settle on my tongue, I felt a strange, hollow peace. It was the peace of a meteorologist who has predicted a hurricane, boarded up his windows, and now simply has to wait for the wind to blow. My phone, sitting on the small wooden table beside me, buzzed. It was a text from Dave. "Dude, it is bad. Henderson walked out. He said he cannot sign off on the audit without a valid key exchange. Bryce is screaming at the server rack." I did not reply. I just watched the screen dim. 20 minutes later, another buzz. Bryce is calling in a freelancer. Some guy he knows from his crypto startup days. He says they are going to hot fix the validation layer. I chuckled softly. A hot fix? You cannot hot fix a missing mathematical foundation. It is like trying to fix a missing engine block by painting the hood of the car red. I knew exactly what was happening inside the office. Bryce was staring at a system that refused to behave. He was seeing error messages that he did not understand, and because he was a man who believed that every problem was just an inefficiency waiting to be disrupted, he was looking for something to delete. He believed that the errors were caused by the legacy junk, interfering with his sleek new code. He did not understand the dead man's switch. 4 years ago, after a minor intrusion attempt by a botnet, I had hardened the archive. I designed the core synthesis system to act as a heartbeat. Every 5 minutes, the archive server pinged the key generator. It was a simple question. "Are you there?" And the generator would reply, "I am here. Here is the current hash." If the generator did not reply, if it was corrupted, disconnected, or deleted, the archive interpreted it as a hostile takeover. It assumed that a hacker was trying to bypass the security, so it executed the fail-safe. The fail-safe was simple and brutal. It took every single document in the repository, the merger contracts, the patent filings, the employee records, and it re-encrypted them. It wrapped them in a randomized 4096-bit shell, and then, crucially, it discarded the key. Without the active generator to reverse the math, those files became digital noise. They were just static, unreadable, irrecoverable. It was a feature, not a bug. It was designed to prevent data theft. If someone stole the hard drives, they would get nothing but gibberish. Bryce did not know this. I had tried to tell him. I had tried to explain the dependencies. But he had called it bloat. He had called it junk. My phone buzzed again, a long vibration this time. A call. Caller ID Bryce CTO. I let it ring. I watched the name flash on the screen until it went to voicemail. 5 minutes later. Caller ID Bryce CTO. I took another sip of wine, Turing jumped up onto my lap, kneading his claws into my jeans. I stroked his fur, listening to the crickets start their evening chorus. A text from Dave arrived. He is looking at the cache files. Douglas, he thinks the error is cache data. He is typing the command to clear the variable directory. I sat up straighter. This was it. The variable directory was where the temporary keys lived. It was the last bridge. If he wiped that, the heartbeat would stop instantly. Do not do it, Bryce. I whispered to the cool mountain air. Just walk away. But I knew he wouldn't. He had to be right. His ego was a starving animal and it needed to be fed. My phone lit up with a new message from Dave. A single line. He hit enter. I closed my eyes. I could imagine it perfectly. The sharp clack of the mechanical keyboard. The smug satisfaction on Bryce's face. The pause as the command executed. arum-rf/var/cache/keys. Force delete. Recursive. No confirmation prompt. In the office 40 miles away, a server fan probably spun down. A light on a rack probably flickered from green to amber. And deep inside the logic of the system, the heartbeat stopped. The fail-safe woke up. It saw the silence. It perceived the threat. It triggered the lockdown. My phone started vibrating violently. It was not a text. It was an automated alert from my personal email, which was still shadowed to the admin logs. Esiko aladiasto rexilmatio fin keep etviolot and shibio identities rlrt curricuit alosist. Then silence. The sun was gone now. The sky was a bruised purple, fading into black. The only light came from my phone screen, which was now lighting up incessantly. Missed call Bryce CTO. Missed call Bryce CTO. Missed call Robert Legal. Missed call unknown number. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb. I went inside and poured myself a second glass of wine. I walked into my home office and sat down at my personal desk. I opened my laptop, an air-gapped machine I used for side projects. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ruggedized USB drive. It felt warm from my body heat. I plugged it in. The file structure of the mirrored repository appeared on the screen. It was all there. The history, the branches. And there, sitting quietly in the directory structure, was core synthesis.proj. The mathematical soul of the company. I could fix it. I could drive back to the office right now, plug this drive into the main server, and run a restoration script. The system would see the heartbeat return. It would unlock the files. The merger would go through. Bryce would probably take credit for the quick recovery, and I would be forgotten. I looked at the code. It was elegant. It was robust. It was my life's work. I opened a code editor. I wrote a small script, a simple executable wrapper. It took the mirrored repository, validated the hash against the company's public key, and reinstated the logic. It was a patch. A1, click cure. I saved the file. I stared at the cursor, blinking at me. I needed to name it. I typed exit_key.x. I was not going to give it to them. Not tonight. You see, in encryption, there is a concept called proof of work. You have to expend energy to prove you are who you say you are. You have to solve the puzzle to earn the reward. Bryce had not done the work. He had not suffered enough to understand the value of what he had destroyed. He thought code was a commodity. He thought engineers were interchangeable parts. He needed to learn that when you fire the architect, the building does not just stand there. It waits for the first wind, and then it falls. I ejected the drive. I set it on my desk next to a picture of my team from 3 years ago. We looked tired in the photo, holding cheap pizza and smiling after a 40-hour crunch to pass a security audit. That team was gone now. Most had left. Dave was the last one, and he was currently trapped in a room with a madman who was systematically erasing their legacy. I went back to the porch. The air had turned cold. I picked up my phone. I had one voicemail. I decided to listen to it just to hear the tone of voice. It was Bryce. Douglas. His voice sounded breathless, like he had been running. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Things got heated. Passionate. That is just how I lead. But I need you to come back and clarify some variable names. The system is acting weird. It is asking for a root seed. I know you have it written down somewhere. Just call me back. We can talk about your severance package. Or a bonus. Just call me. He still did not get it. He thought it was a negotiation. He thought he could buy the math. He thought this was a personnel issue, a little spat between coworkers. He did not realize he was standing in the ashes of a $500 million deal. He was asking for a root seed. There was no root seed. The system generated keys dynamically based on the core synthesis logic. Without the code, there were no keys. He was asking for a map to a city he had just nuked. I deleted the voicemail. I checked the time. It was 10 p.m. The merger signing was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 a.m. That gave them 35 hours. 35 hours of sweat, 35 hours of panic, 35 hours to realize that the legacy junk was actually the oxygen in the room. I took a final sip of wine. It was good wine. Let it burn for a night. I told Turing, who had followed me back outside. Let them see how dark it gets without the light. The storm wasn't just brewing. It was overhead, and I was the only one with an umbrella. I went to bed. I slept soundly, dreaming of tumbling locks and silent, secure vaults. For the first time in 15 years, I did not dream about code. I dreamed about gravity, unrelenting, fair, and absolute. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. I drove to the office in silence. I did not turn on the radio. I did not check my phone. I simply drove, obeying the speed limit, watching the world rush by with the detached curiosity of a ghost haunting his own funeral. I parked in my usual spot. It was 8:55. The merger signing was scheduled for 9 o'clock. I walked to the front doors. Mike, the security guard who'd escorted me out on Friday, was manning the desk. He saw me coming. He looked at his monitor, then back at me. He knew I had been fired. He also knew that Bryce had been screaming at the IT staff for 48 hours straight. Mike made a decision. He looked down at his paperwork and pretended not to see me. I swiped my badge. The light turned green. Bryce had been so busy trying to fix the code, he had forgotten to process my termination paperwork with HR. In his quest for efficiency, he had failed to be effective. I took the elevator to the 40th floor. The hallway was quiet, but it was a tense, vibrating silence like the air before a lightning strike. I walked past the rows of empty cubicles. The engineers were hiding. No one wanted to be in the blast radius today. The boardroom was at the end of the hall. The walls were glass. I could see everything. The CEO sat at the head of the table. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. His tie was loosened, his hair was messy, and he was staring at the table as if trying to telekinetically drill a hole through it. Opposite him sat the Apex partners. They were not looking at the table. They were checking their watches. Their briefcases were on the floor, but they were positioned near their feet, ready to leave. And there was Bryce. He stood at the front of the room, connected to the main projector. He looked haggard. His eyes were wild, rimmed with red. He was sweating, a sheen of desperation that made his expensive suit look like a costume. He was clicking his mouse frantically, opening and closing windows. We experienced a minor glitch with the legacy cache over the weekend. Bryce was saying, his voice cracking. But we have modernized the stack. What you are about to see is the fully realized Vortal. I pushed the glass doors open. The sound of the heavy door swinging shut was the only noise in the room. Everyone turned. The CEO looked up, hope flashing briefly in his eyes before being replaced by confusion. The Apex partners looked annoyed.
Bryce looked terrified. Who let you in? Bryce snapped. Security! Mike! Mike is busy,
I said calmly. I walked to the back of the room and stood there, hands in my pockets. I just came to watch the history you are making, Bryce. Get out, Bryce hissed. You are a disruption. I am the audience, I replied. Proceed with the demo. The Apex partner in the center, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes to match, tapped her pen on the table. We are waiting, Mr. Bryce. It is 9 o'clock. Show us the contract. Bryce turned back to the screen. His hand was shaking. He navigated to the file labeled Merger Agreement Final.pdf. This document, Bryce said, trying to regain his salesman composure, is now secured by our new cloud algorithm. He moved the mouse to the execute button. This was it. The moment the digital signatures were supposed to merge and lock. We are clean, Bryce boasted. We have modernized everything. He clicked. The screen flashed white. A loading bar appeared, verifying signatures, checking timestamp. Then, the screen turned a violent shade of red. Critical error. Decryption failed. Primary key not recognized. Chain of custody broken. A siren sound, a system alert I had installed for catastrophic failure, blared from the speakers. It was a low, dissonant tone, designed to be impossible to ignore. The Apex partner stood up. What is this? Where is the contract? It is just a rendering error, Bryce stammered, clicking frantically. It is the display driver. The file is fine. He clicked again. Error. File corrupted, unable to decrypt. The file icon on the screen changed from a PDF symbol to a jagged, broken page icon. You lost the contract? The CEO asked, his voice barely a whisper. Bryce, did you lose the merger contract? No, it is the old code, Bryce yelled, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. It is that damn legacy junk interfering with my new system. It is Douglas's fault. He left booby traps. That was my cue. I did not leave traps, Bryce, I said. My voice was calm, cutting through the panic like a scalpel. I left load-bearing walls. You are the one who removed them. The room froze. You. Bryce pointed a shaking finger at me. You did this. You sabotaged the key generator. I did not touch the key generator, I said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. You did. You marked it for deletion. You said it was bloated. You said it was junk. Bryce, junk! Bryce screamed. He was losing it completely now. The facade of the cool-tech visionary had crumbled, revealing a frightened, incompetent child. It is incompatible with the new architecture. It is causing conflicts. If I could just scrub the last remnants of your trash code off the server, the new system would work. Is that what you think? I asked, stopping at the end of the table. I looked at the CEO. He thinks my code is the problem. He thinks if he deletes the cache, the last place the encryption keys are temporarily stored, the system will magically reset and work. It will, Bryce insisted. It is a caching error. I need to purge the legacy temporary files. I looked at Bryce. If you purge the temporary files without the master generator active, you wipe the encryption keys permanently. The documents will never open again. They will be random noise forever. Liar. Bryce spat. You are just trying to protect your job. You are trying to make yourself indispensable. He grabbed the keyboard. He opened the command terminal on the main screen. He navigated to the cache directory. The text appeared on the massive screen 10 feet tall. rm-raf/avar/cache/keys. He typed the command. His finger hovered over the enter key. Get that trash code off my system. Bryce sneered. Your code is trash. I am deleting it. Do it, I challenged. He hit delete. The terminal blinked. Command executed. Cache cleared. For a second, nothing happened. Bryce smiled triumphantly. See, gone. Now watch the Vortal work. He clicked on the contract again. The screen did not turn red this time. It turned black. A single line of text appeared in plain white font. Fatal error. Keychain lost. Merger package corrupted. Recovery impossible. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a collapsing star. Where did it go? Bryce whispered. He clicked the mouse. Nothing. Where did the file go? It did not go anywhere, I said softly. The data is still there, but you just shredded the dictionary we used to read it. You panicked me, Bryce said, looking around the room, searching for an ally. He panicked me. You just turned $500 million into digital confetti, I said. The CEO slumped into his chair. The Apex partners were already packing their briefcases. The snapping of the latches sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. Deleted the keys. The general counsel said, his voice hollow. You actually deleted the keys. Bryce stared at the screen, his mouth open. I thought it was just cash. You thought wrong, I said. The panic began to set in. The CEO was shouting for IT support. The Apex partners were on the phone with their lawyers. Bryce was pale, looking like he might actually vomit on the table. Fix it! The CEO yelled at Bryce. Undelete it? Do something? I can't. Bryce stammered. It is a secure wipe. It is gone. It is not gone, I said. The shouting stopped. They looked at me again. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the ruggedized USB drive. It glinted under the fluorescent lights. The code you hated, I asked, holding the drive up. The legacy junk? Bryce's eyes widened. He lunged forward. Give it to me. I pulled my hand back. No, the CEO shouted. That is company property. Douglas, plug that in right now. I don't work here, I said calmly. Bryce fired me. Remember? Security risk. Going rogue. Douglas, please. The CEO begged, his tone shifting instantly from command to desperation. We will reinstate you. We will double your salary. Just plug it in. I looked at the drive. Then I looked at Bryce. He was broken. His ego had been stripped away, leaving nothing but a scared man in a suit he couldn't afford anymore. The code wasn't the product, I said, my voice echoing in the silent boardroom. It was the decryption key, and it just left the building. I turned toward the door. Where are you going? Bryce shrieked.
You can't leave. You have the key. I am going to get a coffee, I said. One that does not taste like burnt ambition. Security! Stop him, the CO yelled. Mike, the security guard, was standing by the elevators. He had come up to see what the noise was about. He saw me coming. He heard the CEO screaming. He looked at me. He looked at the chaos in the boardroom. He stepped aside and held the elevator door open. Have a good one, Douglas, Mike said. You too, Mike, I said. I stepped in. The doors closed on the image of Bryce scrambling over chairs, trying to reach me too late. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight. It was a beautiful day. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the CEO. Name your price. Anything, please. I did not reply. I walked to my car. I would give them the key eventually. I was not a monster. There were innocent people working there, people like Dave and Sarah whose livelihoods depended on that merger. But not today, and not for free. Consulting rates just went up. I started my car. The engine purred. I put on some classical music. The legacy was gone. But the engineer, he was just getting started. I sat in my car for a long time. The leather of the steering wheel was warm under my hands. Through the windshield, I could see the office building towering above me, a monolith of glass and steel reflecting the midday sun. It looked solid, impenetrable. But I knew the truth. Inside, it was a hive of panic. People were running, phones were ringing, careers were ending. And all because of a single file on a USB drive in my pocket. My phone buzzed again on the passenger seat. The chief executive officer. Doug, please. Bryce is resigning effective immediately. We need the key. Name your terms. I picked up the phone. I looked at the message. Bryce was resigning. Of course he was. He was a creature of optics. When the optics failed, he would flee to the next startup, probably failing upwards into another role where he could break things and call it progress. But he would never touch my code again. That satisfaction was worth more than the stock options I had lost. I typed a reply. I did not send it yet. I just looked at the words. $1,000 per hour. Full autonomy. No one touches the repository without my physical signature. And I want a budget for a new team. Dave runs lead on deployment. I deleted it. It was not about the money. Well, it was a little bit about the money. But mostly, it was about the structure. For 10 years, since that Black Tuesday at the fintech startup, I had tried to be a ghost. I thought that if I made myself invisible, if I built the walls thick enough and hid in the basement, I would be safe when the roof collapsed. I thought I could protect the code without engaging with the people who used it. I was wrong. Code is not a shield. It is a bridge. It connects people. It protects their livelihoods, their secrets, their futures. And you cannot build a bridge if you are hiding under it. I had spent so much time building the vault that I forgot to guard the door. I let men like Bryce walk in because I didn't want the friction of a fight. I let them call my work junk because I didn't want to explain why it was gold. That ended today. I looked at the USB drive. It wasn't just a backup anymore. It was leverage. It was the proof of work. I typed a new message. I will be back in 2 hours. Have a contract ready. Triple my previous rate. And get Dave a raise. He is the only one who tried to stop you. I hit send. I tossed the phone onto the seat. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to drive away into the sunset. That is how movies end. In the real world, you don't drive away from the fire you know how to put out. You let it burn just long enough to remind everyone why they need firefighters, and then you turn on the hose. I turned up the volume on the stereo. The music swelled, filling the small space of the car. It wasn't the silence I usually craved. It was loud. It was present. I looked up at the 40th floor one last time. I could almost see them up there, pacing, sweating, staring at the black screen that said, "Recovery impossible." They were wrong. Recovery was possible, but it was going to cost them. I pulled out of the parking lot. I needed that coffee, and maybe a sandwich. I had a lot of work to do this afternoon. After all, I had a merger to save, a team to rebuild, and a cathedral to repair. The ghost was gone. The architect was back, and this time, he wasn't working from the basement. End of recording.